Winter 1923, and a failed Nazi coup has left Hitler's band of followers broken and splintered.
The putsch was, frankly, a disaster. 16 Nazis are killed.
Along with their Führer, rampant nationalist Ernst Röhm and devoted disciple Rudolf Hess are behind bars.
It made them almost political outlaws, terrorists, and I think much of public opinion in Germany, of course, thought that Hitler was really finished.
In hiding and seriously injured former fighter ace Hermann Goering turns to drugs, while a young Heinrich Himmler shelters with his parents. But from the chaos, a new voice will galvanize the party and help lay the foundations for an empire of evil. This is the inside story of Hitler's henchmen, the jealousy, power struggles, and fawning sycophants that will create a monster and fuel the most brutal horrors of the Third Reich. In November 1923, the fledgling Nazi Party march into history. It's an audacious attempt to seize power in Munich and start a national revolution. But it doesn't go to plan.
The putsch was, frankly, a disaster. 16 Nazis are killed. History would have been completely different if a bullet had gone 1 foot to the right and hit Hitler rather than the Nazi standing next to him.
The failure leaves Hitler's followers in disarray. Seriously wounded in the hip and groin, Hermann Goering, the war hero and darling of the upper classes, is on the run.
Goering, after the putsch, had a very unhappy time. He was seriously wounded and rushed over the border to Austria, where the German police couldn't touch him there, and became addicted to morphine.
Another founding member, the ever-loyal Rudolf Hess, is also forced to flee and makes for the Bavarian Alps. The putsch may have ended in chaos, but Hess was thrilled to have fought alongside his beloved Hitler.
Hess is a fascinating individual, fascinating personality. He's the only one of all of them, I would say, who had no real driving ambition. He had an affection for the movement, but particularly for Hitler as a figure, that goes beyond mere political judgment.
For others, it's worse. The party bully boy, paramilitary Ernst Röhm, is behind bars, awaiting trial in Stadelheim prison.
Ernst Röhm's position after the putsch is rather strange. He is, of course, a serving army officer, and now he's a convicted terrorist.
Heinrich Himmler had missed action during the Great War, so even waving a flag at the back of the march became a source of some pride.
Himmler's reaction to the putsch is interesting. He'd come out of the First World War very disappointed that he hadn't played a role in it. And he hankered after some prize, military prize. So he saw in the putsch, here's the opportunity.
Himmler thinks that this is his big moment, and so the putsch in many ways is the first time where he sees proper action. And in this action, he and his party, they've completely failed.
Desperate to keep the dream alive, Himmler visits his old boss Ernst Röhm in prison. But for now, the party is quite definitely over.
In fact, the humiliation is so great that he moves back to Munich and lives with his parents.
Far from the drama, at his parents' house outside Cologne, is an aspiring young author and PhD graduate, as yet unknown to the Nazis, Joseph Goebbels. Not impressed by the failed coup, he notes in his diary another putsch by nationalists in Munich.
I think it's fair to say that the failure of the putsch was really a disaster for Hitler and for the National Socialist movement. It made them almost political outlaws.
They had hoped it would be the beginning of something much bigger than merely a Munich Bavarian movement. It was meant to be the first step towards a national rising.
After 2 days in hiding, Adolf Hitler is caught and imprisoned, potentially facing the death sentence. The firebrand revolutionary is a broken man.
Hitler's behaviour immediately after the putsch fails is not the kind of redoubtable behaviour we'd expect of an Iron Cross holder. He sees his political life, at least, completely falling to pieces.
He became very despondent, and it was said by a number of his colleagues that he genuinely contemplated suicide.
But in the 10 weeks leading up to his trial, something remarkable happens. Hitler undergoes a transformation.
Once Hitler had recovered from his sense of despair, his sense of politics began to play, and he realized that although he's going to be on trial, it would provide a platform for spreading ideas.
Rather than pleading for mercy, Hitler goes on the attack.
He realises this is centre stage. And where else does Hitler love being more than anywhere else but centre stage? And so he turns the whole thing around to his advantage.
And remarkably, he shows an uncanny ability to take from disaster triumph. He turns a humiliation for the Nazis into a sort of triumph by presenting himself as a sort of martyr figure and a salvation.
And he made harangues and speeches. Rather than answering questions, he would launch into a political discourse, which got applause, of course, from those in the court. I did what I did in the putsch for Germany. I did it for my German people. I'm on trial, but fate will not judge me wrongly.
Hitler was always regarded as this kind of southern German rabble-rouser, but actually the courtroom has turned him into a national figure.
Hitler's audacious display doesn't just win applause in the courtroom. It makes front-page headlines across the world.
For acts of terrorism like this, of course, Hitler could have been sent to prison for a very long period of time. He's given a 5-year sentence. I think it's clear that the Bavarian authorities and the Bavarian judicial authorities had a good deal of sympathy for Hitler's position.
Although found guilty, Hitler receives a light sentence. And, more importantly, his performance in the dock has galvanized the right wing, even winning over the highly skeptical aspiring journalist Joseph Goebbels.
Goebbels' first engagement with Hitler came through these transcripts of the trial proceedings held in early 1924, which were widely printed in German newspapers.
A brilliant writer, Goebbels is a complex character, a young man with plenty to prove.
Joseph Goebbels, someone said rather cruelly that he was a physical and emotional cripple. And although it's cruel, it has a strong element of truth in it, because he had a deep, dare I use the terms, inferiority complex.
And like Hitler, he holds a grudge against the Jews, believing his writing career stifled by Jewish publishers. Although it will be many months before the two meet, Goebbels and Hitler are on a collision course that will shape the destiny of their country.
Goebbels was absolutely inspired, and we can trace in his diary entries in March 1924 a growing fascination with this unknown character, with his ideas, and in the course of a few weeks he moves to a kind of starry-eyed idealism about this man and what he stands for.
Along with Hitler, fellow conspirator Ernst Röhm is also found guilty. But Röhm is given a suspended sentence. He is released on the very day Hitler is sent down.
I think for Röhm, there is a moment where he thinks, well, the putsch failed, Hitler's going to be in prison, and maybe there's an opportunity for me now to play a larger role, to be a bigger fish than I was before.
Hitler asks him to build up the SA, the brown-shirted street muscle of the Nazi party. As a disgraced officer, Röhm relishes the chance to create an army in his own image.
Hitler is keen that the SA becomes a kind of political army, waiting for him when he comes out of prison.
But Röhm has one man in his way. Goering is still the official leader of the SA. So Röhm travels to Austria to convince him to hand over control. He finds Goering penniless and dependent on morphine. Realizing that Goering is in no position to put up a fight, Röhm returns to Bavaria, where he addresses his first big problem.
The SA is formally banned in Bavaria. So what Röhm has to do is to provide some kind of cover organization.
So Röhm changes the name. The SA becomes the front barn. And with his many military contacts, Röhm has no trouble finding recruits for this new paramilitary organization. Meanwhile, in Landsberg prison, Hitler discovers he has admirers in high places. His quarters are more like an officer's mess than a cell, and he is granted extensive privileges.
He has his own cell. It's furnished with books, some 200 books.
He even has an elaborate 35th birthday party there.
It was made into a fete. It was made into a day of joy. And he had visitors, almost like a royal court session. They would come and pay respects. It was really a very joyous occasion for somebody actually in prison.
And Hitler even has his own personal secretary, the devoted Rudolf Hess. Intelligent army veteran Rudolf Hess had been something of a drifter before meeting Hitler. But now sentenced to 18 months for participating in the putsch, he is delighted to discover he will be serving time alongside his idol.
I think Hess could not have believed his luck, actually, that he ends up in Landsberg jail alongside Hitler, the man he absolutely idolizes.
But in these early days, it is the devoted follower who inspires Hitler.
He had a good mind. He wrote an essay as a student that Hitler read, which encouraged him to think of the national question and how it could be resolved and Germany's plight because of the war.
Now together in Landsberg prison, Hess encourages Hitler's ambitions and gently starts to coax him into a new role, an authoritarian leader, a savior of Germany. It's just what Hitler wants to hear.
Being incarcerated in Landsberg with his hero Hitler is a terrific opportunity for Hess. I mean, they are forced together, literally, and it means that, he can be by Hitler's side all day. And as a result, the relationship between the two men becomes incredibly close.
Hess uses the time together to seduce Hitler with an aggressive new vision for an expanding Germany. A philosophy peddled by his old tutor, Dr. Karl Haushofer.
Hess had been a student of Haushofer's, and he picked up these very strange, esoteric geopolitical ideas, which are very hard to define even, but they amounted really to the idea that Germany had a destiny and a fate and a right to expand.
It's through Hess and Haushofer that Hitler starts getting these ideas about Lebensraum.
The theory of Lebensraum, or living space, becomes a powerful new motivation for Hitler. It plants the seed of a new Germanic superstate, expanding to the east.
So therefore Hess is a very important figure upon Hitler's thinking.
But perhaps Hess's greatest contribution to the Nazi movement is encouraging Hitler to write down his vision for the future of Germany.
It was suggested that Hitler could use his time in prison most usefully by setting down in book form his ideas that would become, if you like, the manifesto of the movement and also an inspiring autobiography.
Hitler calls his book Mein Kampf, My Struggle. But in reality, Hess is the co-author.
He has two major influences on Hitler. One is emotional, and one is intellectual or ideological. He was a conduit, a means of giving Hitler his ideas.
Together, Hess and Hitler create what amounts to a racist Bible. It dreams of lost Germanic empires, blaming the country's current failure on the Jews and the communists.
If you look at Mein Kampf today, it reads like the words of a madman. It blames the Jew, Jewishness, for all the world's problems, for the problems of capitalism, the problems of communism. It blames the Allies for overly punishing Germany after the First World War. It suggests that certain biological races are better than other biological races. It is a cesspool of hatred, and it's all put through this sort of melange of Hitler's very, very fevered nationalistic brain. And it is the most extraordinary sort of vat of poison.
But although proud of their achievement, Hess takes no credit, happily devoting his efforts to serving his leader as best he can.
Hess had a capacity for calming Hitler and making him feel better about himself. Insofar as Hitler had friends, Hess would be one of the nearest to it.
Hess has cemented his place as the first and most loyal member of Hitler's inner circle. But other veterans of the failed putsch aren't doing so well.
For Goering, the years after the putsch are difficult years. They repeat, really, his experience just after the First World War. He's a drifter. He doesn't really know where he's going and what he's doing.
He's in Austria, he's a wanted man back in Germany, he is basically living on handouts. This is not how Goering would have seen himself at this stage. After all, this is a war hero. He's got the blue max around his neck. He is now this incredibly marginalised figure.
In constant pain from his wounds sustained in the putsch, he seeks solace in narcotics and becomes a morphine addict. Unable to help Hitler or himself, he's out of the loop and has left a vacuum for others to flourish in. Eager to make his mark is Ernst Röhm.
Röhm has immensely ambitious ideas for the SA, and he wants to build it to millions and millions of men, and he wants it actually to rival the army if the Nazis ever get to power.
Renamed the Front Barn, it has grown to 30,000 members. The disgraced army officer has created his own private army, a mercenary force ready to seize power for the Nazis when the time is right. But back in Landsberg prison, Hitler is having second thoughts. After one violent takeover attempt failed, perhaps the time is right to try a different approach.
The most important legacy from Landsberg is probably not Mein Kampf, of course that is vital, but it's actually Hitler's realization, his epiphany if you like, that the way to power is not through the barrel of a revolver or a machine gun, it's actually through the ballot box.
Röhm visits Hitler. With his large army behind him, he is better prepared for a new putsch. He believes he has the troops to put Hitler in power. But he hasn't bargained on Hitler's new thinking.
And of course, Röhm's agenda is absolutely inverted to Hitler's.
Röhm is stunned when Hitler rejects his plans outright, sending him away in total confusion. Röhm's army is dangerous to Hitler. The Front Barn thugs could destroy Hitler's chance of an early parole.
The Front Barn, under Ernst Röhm, is committing more and more violent acts. And Hitler knows that he has to be disassociated with this street violence, this incredibly pugnacious, violent behaviour.
If Hitler wants to be taken seriously as a politician, he cannot afford to be associated with more violence. In May, he makes a shock announcement.
Hitler has no choice but to resign as leader of the Nazi Party in July 1924. He's in prison, and also the Nazi Party is officially outlawed.
He knows to get back on top and get his new vision across, he'll have to play the long game.
It is a gesture. It means that what's going on out there is in fact not National Socialist, and that when he eventually leaves prison, then he'll start again.
Supported and encouraged by Rudolf Hess, he distances himself from politics and stops receiving visitors. With his release set for October, nothing can compromise his freedom. Without Hitler, the Nazi Party fragments.
Hess once said that Hitler is the party is Hitler. It's a very good expression to use as a leitmotif. While he was in prison, the party, of course, continued, but it became fractured. And the elements, the disparate elements within it, of course, vie for dominance in the party.
But the movement doesn't completely collapse. And in the midst of the political chaos, pulling himself out of depression and sensing an opportunity to make a mark, Heinrich Himmler is on the rise.
For a while, he kind of retreats from political life, although he continues to have a very active interest in right-wing politics and is trying to find a way of reintegrating himself into the movement as quickly as possible.
Key to Himmler's appeal is that he is hard-working and smart. In a party of ideologues and hotheads, Himmler gets the job done.
You know, he's a very conscientious man, he's very fastidious, and any political movement, no matter how radical, needs a very, very, very capable backroom boy, if you like.
Himmler takes on roles. He's a can-do figure in the party, and I think increasingly people say, oh, well, we'll get Himmler to do it.
Following Hitler's resignation, local Bavarian Nazi chief Gregor Strasser assumes the role of party leader. It isn't long before Himmler becomes his deputy.
So with Strasser, as well as with others, it is partly about him keeping a foot in the door, but simultaneously also about building networks that can be utilized at a later stage.
And although the Nazi Party is, it's by no means the redoubtable political force it will become, he's proving himself to be absolutely invaluable.
Although officially Strasser's deputy, at just 24, Himmler soon finds himself the de facto Nazi chief in Lower Bavaria. And he's not the only young man rising amid the chaos.
Joseph Goebbels was born in 1897 into a lower middle class family in the town of Reit in the Rhineland.
Like Hitler, Goebbels is something of a pampered mother's boy. Growing up, he finds it difficult to make friends.
As a youngster, Goebbels had a series of operations on one foot, which left him with a permanent disability, and he walked for the rest of his life with a pronounced limp. So he developed as a bit of a loner, a bit of a solitary kind of character.
And just like Hitler, Goebbels believes he deserves better, finding a ready scapegoat for his failings in post-war Germany.
Goebbels is a young man who has a very big ego. He's got a doctorate behind him, he's got books and plays that he's written but not published or staged, and he's also got an extremely virulent strain of anti-Semitism running through him.
Inspired by Hitler's courtroom performance, Goebbels' political enthusiasm is boosted when, in 1924, he travels across Germany to Weimar and attends his first right-wing rally.
Everything which later we associate with Nazi Party ceremonial and ritual and with Nazi Party gatherings was present. So the flags, the banners, the uniform, the marching, the chanting, the singing, the delivery of long speeches to enthusiastic audiences, the violence, the attacks on passers-by, people beaten up at the railway station, drinking and conviviality in the evenings. That was all there.
Though not yet a Nazi member, he throws himself into right-wing politics. But as a disabled evangelist, Goebbels' weapon will be language. He gets a job on a struggling political newspaper.
He had to write the whole thing, and suddenly, though, in his own mind, he was a journalist, and he had a proper job.
Before long, he takes his ideas on the road and discovers he has something else in common with Hitler. He can work a crowd.
And here we start to see now the extraordinary work ethic which drove him for the rest of his life, because he combined this journalistic work with public speaking. At first, a very small, very local audience. But this is where he discovered that he actually had a particular talent for this. And in the space of a few short weeks, he started to gain a reputation as an effective speaker. And his reputation started to spread within the Nazi Party.
At 12:15 p.m. on December the 20th, 1924, having served just 9 months of a 5-year sentence, Hitler leaves Hess in jail and is finally released. After the sensational incarceration and recent leadership resignation, this should be a big deal. But there are no crowds to meet him. Just a single car. Things have changed, and his country is no longer desperate for a messiah.
Germany has become a very different place. The economy started to improve. The Weimar Republic is starting to feel a bit stronger. There feels more stability, there feels more confidence in the air.
So Germany, which has coped with crisis and has now decided it wants to settle down, it wants to try and find a way of living within the terms that have been dictated by the other powers.
In this climate, and without Hitler's leadership, in the 1924 elections, the Nazis take just 3% of the vote. They look finished. Membership that stood at 35,000 in 1923 has collapsed by half. And railing against American loans looks ridiculous in a period of prosperity.
The mood has changed. He can't just sort of shriek and shout at street corners or try to machine gun people. That's not going to work.
With the party on its knees, Hitler is now free to rebuild it in line with the new political vision, forged with Hess.
The Nazis must no longer be a revolutionary, violent party. They must adopt the forms of legalism. They must stand in elections. They must enter Parliament, the Reichstag. They must go through the motions of being a democratic parliamentary party.
Hitler sets out to regain control of his party, but he quickly discovers the ghosts of the past are hard to shake off. Ernst Röhm has been eagerly awaiting Hitler's release, convinced that they can still work together.
Hitler is keen that it becomes a proper political party, that they pursue the legal path to power. But there are people like Ernst Röhm who have a much more revolutionary outlook, who really think that, national revolution means national revolution. Having given him the opportunity to develop the essay, even in a veiled form, he suddenly finds that Röhm has thousands and thousands of followers.
It's a situation Hitler has to address. On April the 16th, 1925, in his Munich home, he confronts Röhm, laying out his political vision.
They've got to look like they are working within the political system and that they are a kind of real and credible political party and not just a bunch of geeky lunatics who try to seize beer halls in Munich.
But old-school fighter Röhm believes any revolution must start with a putsch.
Röhm talks revolution, and Hitler says, very dramatically, revolutions follow takeover of power, they don't precede it. We take power first, and then we have a revolution.
The relationship between Röhm and Hitler very quickly breaks down. Hitler says to Röhm, you've developed this huge political army and revolutionary danger. I don't want that. It's not what I expect you to do. And Röhm clearly is in a great huff about this.
Hitler knows how powerful Röhm is. With an army at his disposal, it is a dangerous moment. But remarkably, it is Röhm who backs down.
It's a battle that Röhm cannot win because Hitler's grip on the party, although not as iron-tight as it will be, is incredibly strong.
Writing to Hitler the next day, Röhm resigns his front barn and SA leadership, but pleads with him not to abandon their friendship. Hitler doesn't reply.
Röhm ultimately gets into a sulk and decides that he's going to go to Bolivia, the other end of the world. He decides, you know what, I can't win this. I'm calling it quits. I'm out of here.
Cast out of the inner circle, Röhm will head off to South America, but his chance will come again. With Röhm out of the way and Hess released, the campaign to win back the party and the hearts and minds of the German people begins. If the Nazis are to rebrand as a serious political force, the process must start with the leader. Hitler gets a makeover.
You can either present the kind of traditional German folkish figure in lederhosen, the long socks and the walking shoes, and that appeals to a certain element of the community. He can also look much more technocratic, and he can wear a very smart lounge suit. And if he's at a great Nazi rally, he's in his uniform.
He settles on the technocrat. He now looks like a well-rehearsed and confident leader, ready to regain control of the Nazi party and take it in a new direction. At the start of 1925, the ban on the party and its propaganda papers is lifted. But the bad news is the newly groomed frontman can't be unleashed on the German public.
As part of the parole settlement, Hitler agrees not to speak in public until granted permission. He doesn't keep his word, doesn't keep his parole, literally, because he does make speeches, and they ban him from speaking again until 27.
They're going to need someone new to help sell their vision. When the ban on the party is lifted, Joseph Goebbels is amongst the first to join.
Goebbels was drawn to Nazism by its socialist element to begin with. Philosophically, he believed the Marxist dialectic, the idea of struggle between the classes. So he was in a position to put into Nazism that essential notion of conflict, that you get nowhere unless you engage in conflict.
Goebbels joins the party in the industrial Rhineland, far away from the Nazi heartland in Munich. He quickly builds on his reputation as a spectacular orator.
He is full of energy, he's full of ideas, he's full of zest. And, it's partly thanks to Goebbels that the party will rise up.
He embarks upon a program of continuous public speaking, traveling ceaselessly, indefatigably, from one end of Germany to another, speaking in beer halls, in meeting halls, in town halls.
He makes speeches. He makes a lot of speeches. He makes 189 speeches in 12 months. That is a serious amount of speeches.
Clearly, his reputation spread across the Nazi party, and people across Germany started talking about this young man from the Rhineland who could give a particularly effective, exciting speech.
On Saturday, the 12th of July, 1925, Hitler breaks his speaking ban to represent the Nazis at a right-wing rally. The young orator Goebbels is in the audience.
The first time Goebbels sees Hitler at this rally of right-wing parties, he effectively falls in love with him. Now, I mean, this seems like a very strange word to use, but it is a form of love, and the word love in relation to Hitler appears time after time in Goebbels' diaries.
Goebbels becomes convinced Hitler is his future. It's a life-changing moment. Shaking Hitler's hand, he knows he wants to work closely with this man.
Goebbels was very anxious, keen, desperate to become part of the circle, you can call it, of Hitler's friends. How to break into it, though? So what he thought, what I'll do, I'll become useful, I'll become vital, I'll become essential to the movement.
Goebbels' plan works. The authorities may turn a blind eye to Hitler's appearances at a local level. But if he dares to go nationwide, he knows he will be arrested. The Nazi Party needs a public face, and Goebbels could just be that man.
Hitler clearly had decided to try to bring Goebbels on side. He had heard of Goebbels' reputation as a speaker and saw him potentially as a valuable asset.
Hitler makes a play to bring this rising star into the inner circle.
Hitler understood Goebbels' talents, wanted to use them, and therefore wanted him in the system. And Goebbels was only too willing to become part of the system.
Hitler plays Goebbels, flattering him in a charm offensive.
Once he came under Hitler's spell, almost he developed a schoolgirl crush on this man.
With Goebbels on side, Hitler wants to see just what he's made of.
And Goebbels was not just invited to come and visit party headquarters there, but he was invited to speak at the beer hall which had been the centre of the putsch in 1923.
And Goebbels didn't let Hitler down.
The meeting itself was a huge success. Goebbels spoke very well. He said afterwards how Hitler embraced him, he had tears in his eyes. And we see from this point the beginnings of a really strong personal relationship between the two men.
Goebbels becomes the newest recruit to the inner circle, and Hitler immediately sets him to work. Without a strong voice in the capital, the Nazis will never achieve power. Goebbels is sent to Berlin.
Berlin is important to the Nazis for several reasons. It's the capital of Germany. It's the administrative centre of Germany. It's the largest population centre. It's the centre for publishing and media. It's the seat of government. And it's a left-wing stronghold.
With just a few hundred members, the Nazi Party is almost unrepresented in Berlin. Those that are there are poorly led and paralysed by political infighting.
If they were to become a national party, a party of government, clearly they needed to be strong in the capital.
Once there, Goebbels sets about galvanising the dysfunctional regional office.
Goebbels was a man who understood intuitively modern methods of propaganda. He would turn a funeral or a wedding or a rally into a Nazi party event. He would have lorries going through the streets, scattering leaflets. He would have flaming red posters. He had a rabble-rousing newspaper whose title, Der Angriff, the attack, says it all, really, about Nazi aggression and violence.
But Goebbels knows his most effective weapon is public speaking.
He developed a strong line in sarcasm, in withering scorn and contempt for opponents and enemies, and he was at his best dealing with hecklers.
Goebbels also reveals a ruthless side. In communist-dominated Berlin, Goebbels backs his carefully crafted speeches with old-fashioned thuggery.
Goebbels was not a classically masculine figure, and I think we can always see a degree of trying to compensate with a love of violence.
although the Nazis are pledged to keep things legal, they're always going to try and push it. And so what Goebbels does is he whips up violence on the street against communists. He gets, organises punch-ups effectively. He organises street fights, broken noses, smashed windows, broken bottles, broken chairs. This is the kind of the soundtrack to Berlin of Goebbels.
Under Goebbels, the Nazi Party bully boys, the SA brown shirts, regularly spill blood to provoke the opposition parties.
I have the sense that his reputation spread that if you got Goebbels in to give a speech, you were in for a good night's entertainment.
But by 1926, 2 years since leaving prison, Hess and his beloved leader Hitler have made little political headway. And wider party elements still aren't in step with their new vision. It's time to shut down rival factions and regain control.
They become anxious that the longer they wait before they start to realise the election results that they're looking for, the more difficult it will be. He began to question, is the party structured in a way that's going to make it effective?
They relaunch the party along their own lines, creating a virtual government in waiting. Hitler leads, with the ever-loyal Hess acting as gatekeeper and controlling appointments. Leadership threats are quickly crushed. Along with the new departments comes a new political protection force. For wannabe soldier Heinrich Himmler, this is a great opportunity. He now wants to run this elite group known as the Schutzstaffel, or SS.
He sees the SS as his potential elite warrior samurai-like unit. They aren't just a kind of local protection squad for Hitler. What this is going to be the creme de la creme of the Nazi vision. And Himmler wants to put himself right at the heart of it.
While most regions pick their SS from brown-shirt thugs, Himmler has different plans. In Lower Bavaria, he will pick men who are more than elite bodyguards. His SS will showcase Nazi racial supremacy and reflect the ideal of German manhood.
In the first years of the process of building up the SS, Himmler is investing a lot of time in handpicking the new members of his organization. He firmly believes, for example, that your physical appearance is a reflection of your racial worth.
Poring over photographs, he eliminates candidates who don't conform to the Aryan stereotype. Even then, to be considered, you had to be able to trace your German ancestry back to the 18th century.
Himmler's vision of the SS really evolves quite slowly in the 1920s. He's very attracted to the idea, a rather mystical idea of, kind of knights of the movement, people who will be pure National Socialists than the rest.
Although the SS are technically still part of the SA, Himmler guarantees that his men will stand apart, an elite force of Nazi knights. Himmler dresses his Aryan elite in distinctive uniforms, made by clothes designer and Nazi Party member Hugo Boss.
You had to wear black boots, you had to have black breeches. And they also have this skull and crossbones emblem, the Totenkopf.
Symbolizing strength and purpose, loyalty and commitment unto death. It's a striking look.
You could compare the SS to a kind of imperial guard, perhaps, from ancient Rome.
Himmler's knights will be dedicated to protecting and serving one man, Adolf Hitler.
He realizes that the best way to advance that is to demonstrate the particular loyalty of the SS to the Führer, to remain particularly loyal, to be on his side whenever there's an inner-party dispute, and to defend the Führer's decisions at any opportunity.
Slowly, the foundations of Hitler's inner circle are set into place. Hess manages day-to-day decisions and party policy. Goebbels is the party's mouthpiece. And Himmler and his SS its police force. For now, there is little animosity between the party's two high flyers, Himmler and Goebbels.
Himmler and Goebbels at this stage are still comparatively young men. They're in their mid-20s. So they are very much junior figures, but they're very ambitious figures. They're both obviously aware of each other. They both will recognise each other's talents.
They did respect one another, and I think they saw in one another competence, efficiency, effectiveness, dedication, a thoroughness in the other, which they admired greatly.
Working in different spheres, these two young achievers are putting all their energy and effort into the success of the party. In 1927, the ban on Hitler's public speaking is finally lifted, and the Nazi Party can release their most potent weapon on the German public. His message: Germany must take back control of their finances from the First World War victors.
When he is allowed to speak, he picks up on what becomes quite a big issue. Recovering Germany must not put itself under the control of financial forces outside. Hitler pushed himself forward quite effectively, becoming a prominent figure, speaking up for German interests.
Hitler's populist speeches woo the German masses, but the Nazis need Germany's power brokers on side too. In the past, Hermann Goering had been that connection, but he's in exile, an enemy of the state, who for the last 4 years has been struggling with pain and morphine. Finally, a door opens for Goering. To celebrate President Hindenburg's 80th birthday, Parliament agrees an amnesty for political exiles. Goering takes full advantage.
In 1927, he returns thinking that he's going to be welcomed back with open arms by the Nazi movement, and Hitler's going to say, "Oh, come back, Hermann, we're old pals." But instead, he finds the kind of response and the welcome he gets is a little frosty.
But Hitler realizes that Goering's talents will be invaluable.
The one asset that Goering has when he comes back is that he's a big personality. He's sociable. He's got contacts.
With his hero status and social skills, he markets himself as an ambassador for the party. He quickly becomes the link between the Nazis and Germany's conservative establishment.
They don't see him as this, dangerous political terrorist. He's not like the Himmlers and Goebbels. He's going to be quite useful for the party in terms of building bridges with conservative forces.
With the inner circle reunited, now they need to rise to the challenge and take their chances in the 1928 national elections. Public speaking, leafleting, behind-the-scenes wheeler-dealing, everyone has a role. It's time for the years of rebuilding to pay off.
For Hitler, this is a test. He's very confident, in fact, that 1928 will be a turning point. If the legal path to power means anything, it means winning votes and winning seats.
But while the Nazi machine runs smoothly, their message of impending crisis is out of step with the general mood.
The 1928 election for the Nazi Party was an unmitigated disaster. It really was the Nazi attempt to show that they were a legitimate party, that actually this nationalist and socialist vision for Germany was the way forward. The people didn't really buy into Hitler's policies.
Polling just 2.6% of the national total, they are 100,000 votes down on the 1924 election. After 4 years of hard campaigning, it's catastrophic.
Even in Berlin, where Goebbels had campaigned tirelessly and courted all sorts of trouble to try to get notoriety and publicity for his small movement, they had built up more support, but they were nowhere close to being the majority party.
As long as Germany remains prosperous, no one wants to hear their tales of doom and gloom.
Fringe parties at either end of the political spectrum need a crisis to get into power. 1928, the German public felt comfortable and they did not need, to be taken out of their comfort zone by Adolf Hitler.
The Nazis gain only 12 of the Reichstag's 500 seats. Of Hitler's gathering entourage, only Goebbels and Goering become elected members of parliament. It's scant consolation.
By late 1988, it's clear that the National Socialist Party is facing crisis. Where is it going? It's not getting enough votes. Membership is growing, but growing slowly. It's clear that what they really need is crisis. The party is not going to become a major political player unless there is a crisis.
With their predictions of financial catastrophe falling on deaf ears, the Nazi Party are on the verge of disappearing as a political force. They need a miracle, and they get it. On the 29th of October 1929, the American stock market on Wall Street crashes, and American financiers call in their loans to Germany. Overnight, the country returns to the anarchy of unemployment and bankruptcy. Only one man had predicted this: Adolf Hitler. He's immediately transformed from political footnote to prophet. As the country collapses into chaos, the ambitious men surrounding Hitler are delivered a golden opportunity, one they will grab with both hands.